Back in 2002, when you were spending your weekend ripping your CD collection onto your newly bought first-generation Apple iPod, there's a good chance you were listening to this. Or this. Definitely this. If you went to the movies, then you probably saw this, or this, or this. But the film you most likely saw, filmed largely in Sydney, Australia, was this.
I don't like sand.
And if you managed to sit through the longest Oscars ceremony in history, you'll have finally reached the point where they awarded the Oscars for Best Picture,
A Beautiful Mind,
Best Actor,
Denzel Washington,
and Best Actress.
Halle Berry in Monsters Ball.
If you flew to Europe, you no longer needed any francs, Deutschmarks, drachmas, liras, guilders, or pesetas, as the euro became the formal currency of all Eurozone countries. And if you flew domestic, you probably didn't fly Ansett. The carrier went into liquidation after 60 years flying. And if you kept up with world news, then you saw this.
States like these and their terrorist allies constitute an axis of evil.
Already at war in Afghanistan, and with a newly established military prison at Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, where hundreds of prisoners were held on indefinite detention without charge or trial, including Australian citizen David Hicks, the US began to focus its attention on one country.
The Iraqi regime has plotted to develop anthrax and nerve gas and nuclear weapons.
Australian Prime Minister John Howard backed the US plan to preemptively attack Iraq and began to rally the troops back home.
The concern that people have about Iraq is that it has a capacity to deliver weapons of mass destruction.
But Australia was divided, with the Labor Party, led by Simon Crean, voicing their opposition to the war. And with a diplomatic row now erupting, Iraq cut its wheat imports from Australia by almost half, causing yet more hardship for Australian wheat farmers, who along with all Australian farmers, were in the midst of Australia's worst drought in a century. But in what was the nation's biggest single export deal at the time, John Howard announced a $25 billion plan for Australia to supply China with liquefied natural gas. And if you were around at the time, then you'll probably remember exactly where you were and what you were doing when you first learned about the tragic and horrific details of the terrorist bombings of the tourist district of Kuta in Bali, Indonesia on October 12, 2002.
This is the carnage. Guys, this is horrendous. I've never seen anything like it.
The attack killed 202 people, including 88 Australians, 38 Indonesians, 23 people from the United Kingdom, and people of more than 20 other nationalities. 209 more were injured. If there's one medal you remember from the 2002 Winter Olympics held in Salt Lake City, Utah, it was Stephen Bradbury claiming Australia's first ever winter gold in the men's short track speed skating. His winning strategy? Avoid crashing, something none of his opponents managed. What a legend! The Bulldogs lost 37 competition points for breaking the salary cap, seeing them receive the wooden spoon in the 2002 NRL Premiership, with the Sydney Roosters beating the New Zealand Warriors in the grand final. The Brisbane Lions took the AFL Premiership, Thomas Johansson and Jennifer Capriati took the Australian Open, Media Puzzle won the Melbourne Cup, Brazil won the World Cup, and Lennox Lewis met Mike Tyson for a hugely anticipated fight. They also participated in a boxing match that same year. Other big stories from 2002, East Timor became independent, Chechen terrorists stormed a Moscow theatre, Slobodan Milosevic sat in the dock at The Hague, and a rover on Mars discovered evidence of ice beneath the surface. And that was 2002.